First Nations TV, your news first.
I'm going to start with the most important information, and this is especially important for the people of Alice Springs. There have been no new positive cases in the Territory in the past 24 hours. However, based on information we received this morning, which I will go through in a moment, we now need to enact extreme precautionary measures for Alice Springs. Effective from 1 p.m. today, Alice Springs will enter a full lockdown for 72 hours. I will now explain why we had to make this decision. I will then explain what this means for the people of Alice Springs. This relates to a man from the Tanami mine site who spent an extended period of time at Alice Springs Airport on Friday, the 25th of June. He arrived at the airport via a charter flight on Friday morning and remained at the airport between 9 a.m. and 3:50 p.m. He did not exit the airport. On Saturday, the 26th of June, after returning to Adelaide, he got a COVID test. That result was not positive. However, he has since developed symptoms while isolating in Adelaide, and 4 of his 5 household contacts have now tested positive. For this reason, we believe he is positive for COVID-19, and we believe that he is highly infectious. It is unlikely that he was highly infectious during his time at Alice Springs Airport. But, like all our other decisions, we will not take a punt on this. We will operate on the assumption that he has COVID-19, and we will operate on the assumption that he was infectious while in the Territory. So the Alice Springs area will now enter a lockdown for the next 72 hours to Saturday. The lockdown direction applies to everyone inside the Alice Springs Town Council boundaries. That includes town camps. We know that there are specific communities around Alice that rely on the town for groceries and medicine. We are now going to go through the process of declaring those areas as lockdown areas as well. This is so that you are able to travel in and out of Alice for essentials. Do not panic, you will get your food. You will get your medicine. We will speak with those communities now. We will update you all on that later. But if you usually live outside of Alice Springs, like in a community, but you are visiting in Alice right now, stay in Alice. Stay there. Do not go home right now. If it is critical, we will be able to help you go back to your home community, but stay where you are now so we can help you and work through that with you very carefully in a way that is safe for everyone. For everyone in lockdown areas, you must stay at home, and you're only permitted to leave your home for the following 5 reasons. 1, medical treatment, including COVID testing or vaccination. 2, for essential goods and services like groceries. 3, for work that is considered essential. 4, for 1 hour of exercise a day with one other person or the people that you live with, no further than 5 kilometres from your home, and to provide care and support to a family member or person who cannot support themselves. The direction on mask wearing also now applies to people in these areas. If you leave your place for one of the 5 reasons, you must wear a mask. Just like the top end lockdown, there will be interdiction points to establish travel in and out of these areas. The Police Commissioner will go through that. But you should not travel unless it is for one of the 5 reasons. Now, to important information on potential exposure. This is very important for everyone in Alice Springs. Please listen carefully. The Alice Springs Airport is an exposure site, but there are different levels of exposure. As I said, this man spent 7 hours in the airport, mostly at the cafe, and several trips to different bathrooms. If you are at Alice Springs Airport between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. on Friday the 25th of June, please listen carefully. Stay where you are. We are now going through a process of refining which areas of the airport are close contact, which areas are casual contact, and which areas are low risk. This will determine your risk of exposure. It will determine whether you are under a 14-day stay-at-home order, whether you need to isolate and get tested, or whether you just have to monitor for symptoms. Do not go and get tested yet. Wait for us to tell you today which category you are in. This allows us to prioritise the high-risk testing first. Right now, we believe that people who spent time in the departure side of the airport on Friday between 9 and 4, the cafe side, are considered as close contacts. Being a close contact would mean you're under a stay-at-home order for 14 days, as are your household contacts. On the other side of the airport, where you enter the building, that is currently considered a casual contact site. That would mean anyone on that side of the building needs to isolate and get tested and stay isolated until you get a negative result. And we consider the car park and drop-off area of the airport as a low-risk site, meaning you only need to isolate and test if you develop symptoms. However, and this is important, we are reviewing the CCTV footage of the airport right now to determine the man's movements. Then later today, we will provide more information on the exposure site. Right now, I will repeat, for everybody who was at the Alice Springs Airport on Friday, the 25th of June, you don't need to do anything right now except stay at home. Stay at home, in lockdown, and later today, we will provide advice on what you have to do in terms of isolating and testing. Do not rush out now to a testing facility. We do not want people leaving home and flooding the testing sites. We need to prioritise that for any high-risk individuals. There won't be many, but we want them in front of the queue for testing. So later today, we will provide more information on the exposure sites at the Alice Springs Airport, and then you will know what you need to do. For everybody else in Alice Springs, there is no automatic requirement to get tested. You don't need to get a COVID test unless you're at the airport on Friday or unless you have symptoms. Please heed this advice. Our testing capacity needs to be directed to those who have been at risk of exposure. Just like the top-end lockdown, we made this decision very quickly. I know it is sudden and shocking. I am sorry about that, but we cannot afford to wait a minute longer. Our incident management team is established in Alice Springs to help coordinate this lockdown. There are authorities on the ground now. They can help you. We have briefed the Minister for Central Australia, the Alice Springs Mayor and local members. Our hotline is still open if you have questions. 1800 193 111. 1800 193 111. Please be patient while our team gets through all the calls. But remember the general rule of thumb. If in doubt, stay at home. Remember, supermarkets stay open. Our essential stores stay open. Cafes and restaurants are open for takeaway. We have no food supply issues in the Territory. For communities outside Alice who rely on Alice for their supply, you will not be impacted. We will work that through with you. The Police Commissioner will explain in a moment how we will manage the interdiction points to ensure people outside the lockdown area can continue to get their supplies. I will give you an update on the top-end exposure sites. The Zibble class in Palmerston on Saturday morning. All 26 attendees have been contacted. They and their household contacts are now under a stay-at-home order for the next 14 days, and testing is being arranged. 6 of the people have already turned negative results, and we will continue to provide updates on the outstanding tests. Now to the Buff Club on the Stewart Highway. The number of close contacts is now 179 due to our close contact tracing. As part of that tracing, there are currently 8 who we are still working to contact to ensure they are complying. This remains a priority. Police are on it. We are under a lockdown order, and these people should be isolating anyway. All tests are currently negative from the Buff Club. I said yesterday we're still waiting on one result from the 7 high-risk contacts, the people who had spent a lot of time at the Buff Club, or with that positive case. We've now got that result back. It is negative. So we had 7 people we were very worried about, and all 7 are negative. They will stay at the Centre for National Resilience in Howard Springs for their 14 days of isolation. But as is now very clear to us, just because they are negative now does not mean they won't be positive later on. That's why all close contacts stay isolated for the full 14 days. To the casual contact exposure sites. As I flagged yesterday, the information for the sites at Gateway Shopping Centre were updated with the specific exposure periods. Those time periods are very narrow. We're talking a window of 10 or 20 minutes. So if you spent time at any of those exposure sites, please visit the coronavirus website to see if the time period applies to you. For example, the Big W in the shopping centre, the exposure period is now only 10 minutes on Saturday, 12 to 12:10. If you're in Big W, outside that period, you are not automatically required to get a test. On yesterday's testing blitz, More than 2,600 Territorians came forward for testing yesterday, and I thank you all. Testing remains an important weapon in helping us ensure there isn't any hidden community transmission. We've already got more than 2,400 tests back, and all are negative, which is a great sign. At the Marara drive-through clinic alone, there were more than 2,000 tests done. I know that some people had to wait a long time for tests at that site, and I thank you for your patience. Please continue to come forward for testing if you have symptoms, but please book in at www.covid19appointment.nt.gov.au. We are continuing to open up more appointments at Marara and putting more resources out there. We will stay open longer if required. To everyone in Alice Springs, I know this is really challenging. The reason we are doing this lockdown is the size of the exposure window and the vulnerability of the local population. I will take no risk with that, no risk. To all Territorians, I woke up this morning hoping this was a day for good news, and there is some good news. There is 0 cases today, but we are still in a dangerous period. The Territory is still under threat. So long as that threat is there, we will do whatever it takes to keep the Territory and you safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Again, this is really important and critical. So I'd like, first of all, to the people of Alice Springs particularly, please listen very carefully. Earlier this morning, literally only a few hours ago, I was contacted by my colleague in South Australia about a Tanami wine worker that had travelled through Alice Springs Terminal, as the Chief has described, and had spent some time there, travelled on, had an initial swab, and that one was not positive. And there's a range of reasons why that might be the case. But very importantly, 4 out of 5 of his close contacts, as in family members, have tested positive. So this does pose risk to the community of Alice Springs. I will say that because this has not been the experience, it's going to be some challenges, but please take this seriously. The best thing you can do is stay where you are. Stay at home, or if you're from out of Alice Springs, find someone else that you can stay with. As the Chief Minister has said, we are going through a process to identify the people who were most exposed in the terminal, and there's work to be done, and the Commissioner is assisting with his team. It's important that the community understands that at the moment the priority testing is going to be people who were most exposed. There would be people who work in the terminal or potentially visited the terminal during the time that the case was present there. I want to mention at this point, because we have this evidence now, the genomic testing of these cases have been validated to be the Delta strain. Highly infectious, infectious early on, sometimes maybe with a shorter illness, but very infectious. Hence the mask wearing. And there's going to be masks available in a number of outlets in Alice Springs. That's important. And if I could say this, we've got multicultural groups in Alice Springs. All of this needs to be communicated to people who may not have English as their first language, or a limited understanding of English, or do not access a number of media outlets and channels. Specifically, I wish to reach out to the Aboriginal people in Alice Springs. And I'll say this carefully. Ayenga Kapatakamara, Nankara, Alagan, and Bladrich, Yorpanja, and Mungana, Alagan. Please stay where you are. There will be food, there will be assistance. We're working closely with Congress and the Tanajera Council to make sure you're safe, you have mask supplies, you have food. For those people who live at outstations and other communities, there's going to be a process as described to make it sure that you can access the important reasons for leaving your place of accommodation or home. To the visitors in Alice Springs, I know you've come here perhaps to experience the wide open spaces and maybe the weather, but also maybe the controls and lockdowns in other places. Well, here we have now 12 million people who are actually in lockdown around the country. That's nearly 50% of our population. So we're all dealing with this around the country, and I want to make it also abundantly clear, the best thing you can do is not move around. There's some news about the wastewater testing in Darwin, that the test that was done on Monday, it was negative around the different sites. Obviously, Howard Springs is always going to be positive. That's good news. But saying that, it's the coming days of daily wastewater testing that are critical to indicate whether we've got any cases that we don't know about, and that information will be provided. In Alice Springs, the equipment was delayed and it arrived in Alice Springs yesterday. They'll be doing wastewater testing today, and also that it does take 24 to 48 hours to get the report back because it has to be sent interstate. Again, this is so important for the Territory, our lifestyle, Territorians and those who've come to be here, that we actually do comply. And I'm going to say again to those people who actually don't wear masks properly or don't wear them at all, you are running the risk of spreading the virus if you might have it. And I know some of you will say, well, you know, I run fast, it's hard to wear a mask. Well, maybe you don't run as fast. The risk for me is actually sometimes when you stop and talk to people along the way. So thank you for everybody, and I want to particularly thank a lot of teams that work well into the night after a long day yesterday or across a range of things, again starting very early this morning. Our partnership with others and with the community is so important. Thank you.
The Southern Incident Management Team has been activated in advance of the lockdown for Alice Springs at 1 p.m. today. The community of Alice Springs can be very reassured. We will get public messaging out to you, as has been indicated, as we do our forensic analysis in partnership with our health colleagues on the movements of the individual at the airport last Friday. We will be able to consolidate the information to ensure we can prioritise the testing arrangements that will be in place. The key message: there is no need to panic. Do not rush to the supermarket right now. The supermarket will be open past 1 p.m. You will be able to get access to stores. Again, our clear message is one individual from the household, please go. If you have adequate store for today, don't leave home. Stay home, go tomorrow. If you assist us, then I can ensure that our resources are pointed where they're needed the most, to be able to work with our most vulnerable down there. It is the case in Alice Springs that we do have a high cohort that would be identified as vulnerable. We will be working with the Central Land Council, with Tangentyere Council, a multitude of other not-for-profits and non-government organisations to enable sufficient information, resources and other support that you may need. The clear direction: stay home. Stay with family, stay with friends, but stay together. Do not move out and about. If you meet any of the reasons to leave your home, you must wear a mask. That is mandatory. There are fines associated with not doing so. We will again move into an education posture for Alice Springs as it relates to the enforcement. We know people want to do the right thing. Unfortunately, this morning we issued our first infringement for an individual, 36-year-old male in Darwin in the CBD who frequented a coffee shop, who simply refused to wear the mask and after multiple engagements with our people continued to be recalcitrant. He's now $5,056 poorer. Ignorance is not going to be tolerated. Let me be very clear about that. The information, the education, we've been very clear. The activities that will occur in Alice Springs as you see authorities move around is that we will have road interdiction points on the North Stewart Highway, the South Stewart Highway, Undulia Road access, and also out to Larapinta Drive. To the communities that surround Alice Springs, again, we say to you, stay clear of Alice Springs for the time being. We will ensure adequate messaging is getting out to you on the ground. Again, there is no need to panic. We will also be in touch to facilitate the movement of food and adequate supplies and clinical service and medical service if you need it. You know your local clinics, you know your local stores, there is no need to panic. If you need assistance, if you need guidance, please ring the COVID hotline. Alice Springs knows that if they come together, as I know they will, an incredibly strong and resilient community, they will see this through very quickly. The wastewater testing will give us a great deal of encouragement once we know that result. We will also get, as I've said, the information we can to you as soon as possible as we can articulate the definitive movements of this individual. That information will come out later this afternoon. So please continue to monitor your reliable media outlets as well as our coronavirus.nt.gov.au website and our Secure NT social media pages. More broadly to Darwin, as has been touched on, particularly with the Buff Club, we're now down to 6 outstanding. As has been mentioned, we've been actively working to ensure that we're contacting all individuals we possibly can. I also put the call out to any of you who have not been contacted yet, who have not been able to make contact with us, who are hearing this for the first time. Please make that contact. We want to ensure that you are well. We want to ensure that you have a test, and we want to be able to prioritise that test for you for the greater certainty for the Northern Territory community and the Greater Darwin lockdown area at this point in time. We have many moving parts continuing to go on. I visited the Marara facility this morning. We've done a lot of work overnight as it relates to traffic management plans. As people head there, and again, we encourage everyone to make a booking. You will be guided into various sections of the car parks of the many facilities down there where we will be able to fast track assurance that you've made your booking, that you've got all the adequate information, which will streamline the process and the speed at which we're processing. The efforts of many Northern Territory public sector employees, police, fire and emergency services personnel and other not-for-profits who have been out in the field providing assistance cannot be understated. The Northern Territory is very blessed to have the heroes they have, but the work is nowhere near completed. We will continue to work hard to narrow down every individual that we understand is a close contact. We will ensure that their testing is undertaken so that we can work towards, as quickly as possible, enabling the Northern Territory and its various locations to return to the freedoms that we've enjoyed. Thank you.
First Nations TV, your news first.